you want to be a CEO, if you want to make a ton of money, you have to drive business.
You got to be in the trenches and you got to battle and you need to execute at the highest possible level.
Grayson Lafrenz.
Grayson Lafrenz.
He's the CEO of Power Digital Marketing, an online internet marketing agency. Power Digital has been named San Diego's healthiest company, fastest growing, top places to work.
Grayson himself has been the Entrepreneur of the Year in San Diego.
I'm a believer that the team is everything. If you have the best people and they've got a growth mindset where they're really working hard to get better and they'll look in the mirror, they'll own their mistakes, and you're going to win. When we started, it was like we'd work with whoever would take us. So we had to be really resourceful and scrappy. I got rejected probably about 80 times. One of the superpowers that I've had is just go and be aggressive and not be afraid. And I'm very entrepreneurial and I like to build and I like to move fast and try stuff. I didn't really plan for success.
What would you have done differently if you had a plan for success?
I don't know, man. I think
Welcome to this week's episode of Vinny Vidi Vici, and in the studio with me today is Grayson Lafrenz. Grayson is a career entrepreneur, has built some amazing businesses, and his most recent business, which he's the founder and chairman of, is Power Digital, which manages billions of dollars worth of media spend online. This episode is for those of you who really want to understand how to sell a business, how to grow your business, and how to manage and develop the people in your business. So Grayson, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Vinny. Great to be here with you. Big fan of your show.
Thank you so much. And I see you've been a podcast host before in your previous life.
Yeah, I was like a guest host. The team, it was a Power Digital podcast, and they didn't trust me or think I have more of a face for radio is what they told me. So they let me come on here and there and host a show, but usually it was some of our amazing team members.
Well, I'm not sure that's entirely true, but thank you for being here today. I'd love to just start with a little bit about your background. You're a native San Diegan, and you've really, really risen to the tops of the industry. But let's tell us about how you got started and how you developed this passion for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so it's not the normal entrepreneurial story that you hear from a lot of people where as a kid I was doing this and that. For me, I grew up here in San Diego, and as a kid what I cared about was competing and sports and those types of things. And I was always a pretty average student. I had some learning disabilities and ADD and just struggled to focus in school. So I remember actually my mom showed me a couple of years ago an email she sent my dad when I graduated high school saying, "We did it. Grayson graduated high school. We were successful." But I went to college at the University of Arizona, and that's where I really got exposed to entrepreneurship. And it was actually through my roommate, who was actually a co-founder of mine, Rob Rodriguez at Power Digital, and I've started several businesses with Rob. And his dad and family was very entrepreneurial. And as a fairly immature 18, 19-year-old, when his dad would visit us, the lifestyle that he had, I was like, I want that. And, he was on private jets and doing cool stuff like that. And that's what originally got me curious to kind of learn more about entrepreneurship. And so I graduated college in 2007, which was a huge blessing actually, because, I was 22 years old, a very bad economic kind of cycle that we were going into, but I never knew anything else. And so I had an idea at that time to start an online prep course that would have targeted the parents as well as maybe the students of juniors and seniors in high school, with the objective of let's get them prepared to live on their own, to go to college, because there is a very big failure rate. So I thought it was a great idea. I started to try to raise money. I got rejected probably about 80 times, and I think it was on
80 times
attempt something along those lines. I mean, I was pitching.
How did you keep going? Because
I would ask my dad, "Can you introduce me to this friend?" And then, it wasn't a fit for them. And then, "Can you introduce me? Do you have anybody that would be interested in this, or I should talk to and pick their brain?"
But how don't you get discouraged after so many attempts?
Yeah, so I think that's one. Luckily, probably one of the superpowers that I've had is, just go and be aggressive and not be afraid. Which is interesting because I'm more of a naturally introverted person, and I would say socially, or even as a young single guy, cold calling women at a bar, I had friends that were far better and more confident than me in that. But for business, it was different because I know it wasn't personal. It was never about me. It was about the idea or what I was doing. And so I just kept going. I finally got in front of a real successful entrepreneur, and he goes, "Dude, it's 2007. You have zero skill set. You have zero experience. No one's going to invest in this idea. You need to go get yourself, some experience and a skill set." And I said, "Okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. What's the skill set I need?" And he said, "You need to learn how to be a rainmaker and drive revenue, and you need to learn how to manage and develop people and build teams." And so he actually introduced me to what was the largest agency of Xerox. And he said, they're great at training you. There's this guy there, JT, who's the best coach and developer of these skills. JT's our COO at Power Digital now. And he was a big mentor to me. And so I went and worked there. And I remember when I interviewed with him, it's probably not the best move, but I told him, I plan to be here for 3 years and then I'm going to leave and start my own business. They're probably like, okay, dude. They still hired me. And I had a ton of success and a ton of fun there and became their number one salesperson and then a sales manager and all that and helped launch a new product. And then while I was there, they actually sold that business to Xerox. And the foundation skill set that I got of sales was so valuable and just management. I was a horrible manager when I first started managing people. I don't think it's just a skill people have. And I think it's given me a huge advantage. And when I look at a lot of the entrepreneurs that I know that have been super successful, a lot of them have that Rainmaker ability where they know how to prospect, they know how to sell, they know how to get deals done. So that's how it started. And then there was a series of startups that I was a part of and that I started that didn't necessarily work out the way that I would have hoped. None that we like lost people money or anything, but just I think that 3-year stretch when I left Xerox when I was 24 probably, I think I made $30,000 over the course of 3 years. Wow. So I had saved the money from sales and I was living very low cost, but it was a grind to ultimately get to a business that was a manufacturing company that I thought was going to be the end all be all. And then that took off and then got sued by our biggest competitor and fought that and ended up kind of, I wouldn't say losing the lawsuit or winning the lawsuit, but we basically had this injunction where we'd have to get city by city approval to sell this product and the bureaucracy made it impossible. And I learned along the way internet marketing and my cousin and my college roommate had also learned it. My cousin was working at an agency. And so we're like, hey, we need a way to bring money in the door and find a way around this legal issue. And so we started doing internet marketing just for local entrepreneurs. And that's really how Power Digital started. And the journey's a lot longer. I know that wasn't that concise and short, but the journey's a lot longer to get there. But it was kind of a series of pivots to ultimately starting the company.
Starting a company with 2 co-founders, like I've done that before. Actually, I've done it with 2 co-founders twice, and then 3 co-founders once, and 1 co-founder once as well. So like I've had the range of it. I think 2 is the maximum I would ever recommend, and even then, it's really hard working with 2 other people at each stage. How did you guys work out? How did it come together?
Yeah, so the manufacturing business I had, I was partners with my college roommate in that, and we had another SaaS business that he was running while I was doing this, and we were really just hustling, trying to figure out how to make enough money to get by, and hoping that one of these would become successful, and then we'd be able to go all in on it. And my cousin, who was working in marketing, he was doing SEO. Basically, I'd hit him up because I was like, I'm priming the pump with all these distributors to sell these products. Some of them are doing it, but we're doing all the work creating these orders. We should have an online way to sell this. So he set up kind of an affiliate site. And so that's what happened. And then we started just talking about it. And I agree with you. I don't think I'll ever start another business where I have even a equal co-founder, I guess. I think when you go into it with everything's equal and we're all equal partners and we're partners forever, it's troubling. But part of the issue that we had is like, I didn't really plan for success. And so the advantage it gave at the time is it gave us 3 different skill sets that cost nothing. And so it was critical when we had nothing and had no money and we're bootstrapping this company to have those resources and skills. But then as the company grew, companies outgrow people, and some people adapt and grow, or some people maybe can serve in a different role and be very effective. But then you get egos that are involved and challenges. And so in this case, one of the co-founders, we actually had to fire him from the business.
Which one?
About 3 years in, my cousin.
You fired your cousin?
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it necessarily firing, right? I mean, we were trying to convince him of areas that things needed to change. And I didn't want to do it, but it ultimately came to the point where the team, at that time, I think we had a 10, 12-person team, they came to me and said, look, if something doesn't change here, we're all going to leave. And I'm a believer that the team is everything, especially in my business where it's a service business. If you have the best people and you develop them and they've got a growth mindset where they're really working hard to get better and they'll look in the mirror, they'll own their mistakes and they'll improve, you're going to win. And so ultimately they left me with no choice when they were like, look, I know you don't want to do this, we get it, but something has to change or we can't work here.
How did you actually do it? I mean, this is your cousin,
There
right?
had been so many
Is this on your mother's side, your father's side?
Yeah, so it's my father's sister's son. And
Okay.
we were best friends growing up.
Okay.
So it was difficult. He's a very talented guy, and it's frustrating because I think it could have gone down very differently. But really, I tried all different types of things and everything to get alignment and to corral that. And I think some people are better suited for the gunslinger. You know, you're really scrappy and you do that. Whereas when you have to start managing people and systematizing stuff and being a leader to where it's like, you know, at the end of the day, if my people aren't successful, that's on me. And I need to look in the mirror and say, well, why didn't I set them up to succeed? I think some people have that skill or can develop that and others can't. And so the way it ultimately went down is a lot of different conversations. And then unfortunately, it came to the point where there was just disagreement between myself and college roommate and my cousin. And we had to tell him that was it. But we treated, I mean, if I were him, I would actually be fairly happy. And years later, his advisor actually told me that as well. Like the way you treated him was like a saint. We let him keep the equity. We did not buy the equity out.
Okay.
We went on to do
That's
a huge
amazing.
transaction where he made a lot of money. We allowed him to roll some money on the next transaction where he made another bite of the apple. And now after the last transaction that we did last year, he's now totally out. But along the way, you know, made amount of money to where he never has to work another day in his life.
Okay.
So-
I mean, so just for context, I think I read in the Wall Street Journal the company was sold for between $500 and $1.5 billion. So, you know, even if he had a small stake in that, he would have made a ton of money.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you treated him well.
Yeah, and I had hoped that, you know, obviously at the time it was going to hurt, but I had hoped that we can rekindle and that, like, his mother was like a second mother to me.
Have you guys rekindled?
No. And I haven't spoken to his mom. The day that it happened, I have a voicemail from her that was not very friendly, and she hasn't spoken to me or my father, who has cancer and just got diagnosed with Parkinson's and was her bigger brother that, you know, really played a very big leadership role in the family. Haven't been at a holiday, so I felt a lot of guilt at the time because my extended family also lost these family members. But I had hoped that after the first transaction in 2019 that it would be like, okay, well, this was fair.
Everyone's making money, yeah.
And, you know, Grayson did what was needed to make sure the company would be successful and get to where it needed to go, but there was no financial, you know, screwing over. In fact, it's not good for a company to have somebody, he owned a third of the company through that owns a third of the company and is not involved.
It's a big chunk of cash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I sleep very well at night because I did everything I said I was going to do. And I don't have any resentment or ill will. And frankly, when the check was cut, I was proud of what we did. And I was proud to see the money go to him. I think it got more frustrating later on when we were tracking down signatures on the last transaction. And one of the things I was very proud of with every exit we've done is, you know, we've had, like on our last deal, I think we had 15 people or so that made actually on the first deal, 15 people that got the biggest check of their life. On the last deal, I think it was more like 80 people that got the biggest check of their life. And to me, that's what it's about, is getting them skin in the game, and people are battling and giving blood, sweat, and tears to get to a shared outcome. But to get the doc signed on the last deal, the last person to sign every doc was him. So I'm having to call and pester, and that was when I was like, okay, I see what you're about. I wish you nothing but success, but we're not going to have a relationship again, and it is what it is.
I mean, it's one of those tough things where I think the ego gets in the way of the reality, right? I mean, I as a founder, as someone who's been an entrepreneur for many, many years, sometimes you have to have these hard conversations, and people shouldn't take it personally. You know, if you had said to me, "Hey, we took away 90% of his equity," but you left him with everything.
Yep.
That's unbelievable, and that's you know, it's great. I mean, like, and how many years in were you in the company?
This would have been we're 4 years in,
Okay.
and then
So he was fully vested in theory.
Yeah, I mean, he was the co-founder.
Yeah, which is fine.
And he's vested, but there's a buy-sell and operating agreement, right?
But
And
you
you can
didn't
do things
execute
like
it?
that.
You
And
didn't execute it?
yeah, and again, it was like my intention was not to do that, make that move because I wanted more or I wanted more money or my partner did.
Very
It was
magnanimous.
simply because culture in our business is everything and people are everything. And it's hard to, it's hard to retain people in the agency model.
Yeah.
And it's hard to recruit them. And like my responsibility as CEO more than anything over the last 10 years in serving that role is to take care of our people, to treat them fairly, to motivate them, to attract great people. And when you have a very special nucleus of people that becomes a lot easier. They attract, the culture is not the CEO. The
No,
culture is
absolutely.
the people,
people.
and the sum of the people. And so I just couldn't risk losing the team and the core that we had, or he would have made, none of us would have made any money.
Yeah. I think it's very magnanimous of you. So, like, I think what you do is the right thing, personally, just as an outsider looking in. But let me double click on this. Would you recommend anyone going into business with a family member?
I think it depends. I think if I had worked with the family member before, that's the other thing when we talk about co-founders, is there's people that I would like to have as co-founders in the future, but they're people that I've been in the trenches with and I've battled and I've seen how they show up and I've seen how they act under adversity and I've seen how they respond when they fuck up or make big mistakes. So if there's a family member that fit that description, yeah, I probably would. And I've always been a person that has hired a lot of friends, and I've had that work out for me and I've had that not work out for me. But frankly, I don't see it as a huge risk always, because I know that I'm going to show up and be fair, and I set the right expectations. And if it's not even like their performance. Like, look, if they can't do the job and they work really hard at it, they can't do it. It is what it is. No hard feelings. But if from a core values perspective and those things, they show you a different person, then what? You're losing a friend that wasn't who you thought that they were anyways.
No big loss.
And so I don't see it as a huge risk. I mean, I'm probably pretty scarred from the family thing, so I probably wouldn't go out of my way to do that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily tell somebody not to do it, but I would make sure that you've not just known them for a long time, but that maybe you've worked at the same place and you've seen them. And then I would also make sure with partners that I set it up so that if there is a problem like what we faced, there's clear
You can unwind it.
maneuvers,
Yeah.
But I love winning with other people. And so I don't know that I'd want to start a business where it's just me. Over time, I'd want to give equity to people. I think the other challenge with co-founders is what you need as a startup is different than what you need when you reach, call it 50 people, is different than what you need. The skills change. And I think that book, the Hard Thing About Hard Things, is one of my favorites. And actually was a book that had me have the aha moment, in addition to the team telling me this, in addition to an advisor telling me, dude, you got to make this move. But that's okay, and there's seasons. Like, we've had some people at Power Digital that were absolutely core, and I love them forever, to us going from 0 to 15 million in revenue. But when we went from 15 to 50, the role they were in outgrew them. And if a couple of them are now in other roles where they're killing it, they're very happy, and they're making great money, and they're still a part of the journey. Others couldn't handle that. Hey, you could still be really successful here, but it's in this seat and not this seat. And they left. And I think a lot of people that did, they probably made a mistake, because, again, some of these people have skin in the game in these. But to me, moving to chairman, I was starting to feel as CEO, like, we're going to have 1,000 people by probably the end of Q1. And it's a different business than where my passions are as CEO. You have to be more systems and process focused. There is more politics that come into play as much as you try to keep them away. And I'm very entrepreneurial, and I like to build, and I like to move fast and try stuff. And so for me to move to chairman, ego-wise, yeah, being the CEO is a cool thing, and I loved it. And there's probably was some loss there, but as chairman, I get to talk to entrepreneurs all day because I'm leading the M&A team. I get to do deals, which I love to do, and big deals. I get to work with a small and elite team. I still get to see all the parts of the business and be more the advisor. So for me, I look at it similar, where that move made sense for the company and for me. And I think in a lot of cases, that's the same thing, maybe with a co-founder, but I think a lot of times they don't have that self-awareness. And so it doesn't work out that well.
Something you said early on, I think really resonated and stuck with me. And I want to just go back to that. You said you didn't plan for success. And it's interesting because there's two parts to the reason why it stuck out with me. First of all, I find that the most successful people are the most optimistic, and the ones who can see through, the quagmire of failure and risks and everything else, and building a company for the future. The other thing, which, when you plan for failure, you become more risk averse. And so failing to plan for success in some ways is good, but it's also bad, because you can set yourself up for failure ultimately. So I want to just discuss that that, sort of the dimensions around that. What would you have done differently if you had a plan for success?
Yeah. And I think when I say that, I didn't plan for failure or success. I planned for what was right in front of me. And, how do we get month one? How do we figure out how to get profitable so we can do this? And then how do we stack it and stack it and stack it? And I do think a lot of entrepreneurs get to head in the clouds on stuff. And I hear a lot of entrepreneurs that have small businesses that are doing $5 million in revenue. And they're like, I need to work more on the business and less in the business. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think for us, it was like 15 million in revenue is when that needed to start. At the smaller size, it's like, you got to be in the trenches and you got to battle and you need to execute at the highest possible level. And you're the highest paid person and you have that, a lot of equity, you better be contributing. But I think to answer the question, if I plan more for success, frankly, I had not had success at big scale. So I don't even know how I would have planned for that. Now, if I was starting a business, it would be more like, okay, what are our needs today, a startup that I have, and what are the skills and talents, and what does this team need to look like to get to our first milestone? And maybe that first milestone is profitability. And how quickly do I think we can do that? And then what's our scale to get from that to a cruising altitude where it's kicking off good cash flow and we start having optionality on maneuvers, and maybe we can layer in an M&A strategy to go quicker. And what are the skills that we need there? And then ultimately, when we get to being a real business that is relevant, what are the skills that we need? And so, for example, in those early phases, I don't think you need a CFO. So I'm not going to have a co-founder as a CFO. I'm going to hire for that later and maybe get them skin in the game. In those early phases, depending on what you are, you need rainmakers that are going to go get the clients. You need the people that are going to fulfill it and be the product. And so for a service business, I'm probably going to solve for those and say, how do I build that team? Or how do I get a co-founder that brings that skill? But I know that over time, there's going to need to be more really key talent that comes in. And so I need a plan for that. And so that could be an option pool, or that could be like, hey, I've been through the scaling journey and here's how I'm going to evolve in the company. And so for you, I hope that you will, but like you're critical to this. So maybe your piece is smaller, but then there's a path for you to earn more equity in the future based on if you're able to evolve your skills and show that you can do something that you haven't done before. So I think it's thinking through things like that. But I just really believe, like, again, I think my skill set is probably where I'm at my very best, is probably that, okay, we have product market fit, we have product in the market, and we're going to scale this fast and scrappy. And then as we get to a point where we got to really start putting structure and a lot of process in place, I need somebody that can do that because that is not what I'm great at. So I kind of know where my sweet spot is. And I think everybody has one of those.
I want to dive into your skill set now. Let's get some really good nuggets out of you there. How do you handle, and give me an example if you can, or you can, no names if you have to. Give me an example of a client that you worked with that was in a very competitive space where it wasn't the number one brand, probably the fifth or 10th, something along those lines. And the top three are massive companies, big conglomerates, big tech, whatever it is. And how did you manage? Did you have a success story? Were you able to take them into the top 3 or top 5, or And how did you do that?
Yeah, lots of them. Most of the ones that I would have been from years ago because I've been for the last probably 5 years. I've been very removed from.
But that's
clients.
Fine. Go back and tell us.
Yeah, so I mean that was our whole client base. I mean when we started, it was like we'd work with whoever would take us, and so we had to be really resourceful and scrappy. And I think for those brands. I'm trying to think of a category specifically. I could think of one that was a fitness brand.
Okay.
E-commerce fitness brand. Decent little business, but they're competing against the biggest, equipment resellers and manufacturers in the world. And that's a beautiful thing. And I love those brands. The advantages that we had with them is they can move super fast. So they can be really agile in trying stuff. They can get very aggressive on decision-making because there's not all this red tape. They can get aggressive on messaging and what they say because they don't have to pass that through a team of attorneys and think about what's the political blowback on this or our massive distribution network. If we run this promotion, they're going to get offended. And
so basically, the less bureaucracy in an organization,
exactly,
the faster you can grow it.
Yes. The small company's advantage is speed and agility.
Yeah.
The big company's the aircraft carrier. But there's also a lot of things that big brands, especially around e-commerce, they ignore completely. And it's funny because
For example?
An example would be SEO. And so when we first started, we would look at these big brands and we're like, oh my God, they have the most powerful website in the industry and they're doing none of the fundamentals. Or the other example would be media. So on search, for example, they're running huge top of funnel campaigns and TV, and we'd go audit their search accounts and it's all brand. And they're not like, how do I go get the non-brand? They're just focused on top of funnel. How do we have people aware of the brand? And then they're going to capture the demand. And so when you're a small brand, you can't capture demand. You have to go create demand.
Yeah. You have to go long tail.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest mistake I think a lot of businesses in digital media make. Well, utilizing digital media, and this is from my experience running an SEM business as well. The long tail is where you get the most ROI.
For sure.
It's the cheapest keywords to be on when no one else is there, no one's doing the work and the keyword research. And if you can capture that, you can grow your business almost exponentially, because the PPC, for example, on Google is very expensive on the head words, any category, because there's just so much competition. Yep. But on some of these tail words, you can pick them up for like 5 cents minimum bid clicks. And if you turn that into a buck or two in profit, you can reinvest that profit very quickly.
For sure. Or the other strategy for small businesses that I've always loved, and the big brands, they just don't mess around with this because, I mean, some of them will do it here and there, but they don't mess around with it because it also doesn't move the needle for them.
That's the problem.
But the other one would be, you have an e-commerce business, so you got 10,000 customers on your list. What's the profile of your customer? Pick up the phone and call the other brands that are selling other products to the same customer and say, hey, let's do a joint promotion. Here's a free product. I want you to put this in your package. Your client's going to get more value for this. And now they're introduced to ours, and we'll do the same.
Yeah.
Or I'll mail my list on your behalf. My list will be stoked because they just got a great promo. But I just got introduced to 10,000 new clients for free, and all I had to do in return was mail my list and educate them about this other brand, which if I believe in the product and it's a great product and I'm giving them a deal, they should be happy to get that exclusive offer. So there's stuff like that can be done that's just scrappy, and the big brands, the stuff doesn't move the needle for them. Or I'll give you another example. Growing Power Digital, we have 4 pillars that drive our economic engine. Never will change. It's new business, and we have a target every month, quarter, year. Service expansion, so taking that client and growing the product. Churn, and there's a threshold, and then efficiency. And the biggest metric we would use for efficiency is EBITDA per production employee, like billable employee. For new business, for the first 5 years, all the deal flow came through channel partnerships. That's such a scrappy, small move. Why I liked it is it gives me a fixed cost per acquisition. Channel partner sends us opportunity. If we win the deal, we pay them. The way to do it is to pay them each month so they keep thinking of you and they get that mailbox money check and you're top of mind. But you could try to go build an outbound team from day one, or spend a bunch of money on your own marketing to try to drive inbound. But you may fail. And frankly, we failed a lot cracking the code on those things. You go recruit a channel partner, and even you get one good channel partner that brings you a good lead every week, and it starts to compound and stack, and it doesn't cost you anything unless you win the deal. And the big brands, they just won't mess around with that. Or they'll do it differently. And even for channel partners, like for Power Digital, my dream early on would have been some huge branding agency. Well, they never did anything because they didn't give a shit. Yeah. They'd send it to us, and if we're going to kick them a $3,000 a month fee, it doesn't move the needle. Just like Power Digital now, people come to me and they're like, we have a great product, we want to be a channel partner. If we think it's going to help our client, we'll do it. But we don't care about the money we get back, because even if it was $50K a month, over time, it just doesn't move the needle. So what I learned in channel partners is it's the salesperson that's selling to those customers where, man, $1,500 a month, that's my rent or car payment. Or it's the small branding agency where they're like, damn, I can hire another person because of these channel partner fees. So it's just figuring out the more scrappy moves that are meaningful to smaller businesses, but big businesses, it's just like scraps on the ground for them.
That makes a ton of sense, and that's exactly my experience as well. In the early days, as an agency, you take what you can get, and you build it up, and then later on, you have to keep growing. It's big game hunting, right? Yep. You have to get into big game hunting. So, but let me go back a bit here. So if someone's out there with a business, what is the typical profile you look for? If I walked into your offices today and said, hey, I have this company, what are the questions you're going to ask me to qualify me as someone who would be the right fit for an agency the size that you're at, nearly 1,000 people, versus, when are they better suited to going to a smaller agency to help them?
Yeah, I mean, we want to work with businesses that are doing 250 million plus in revenue.
Okay.
And that have really good differentiation, really good product, don't have like huge business issues that sometimes I think companies think that that marketing's at fault, but like if you don't have a good product or a differentiated product, then you can do all the marketing in the world. You might find a little thing here that works, but it's just not going to happen. We like clients that have teams that are educated and that understand digital and how it works so that we can have a true partnership and collaborate with them. And that one of the big elements is to have a growth mindset. And so they want to partner. It's not a you versus me thing. It's a best idea wins. That's what we're looking for. But really to answer the question is Power Digital is a tech-enabled service business. And our technology platform is called Nova. It does a lot of things. It sits at the core of what we do and a lot of client-facing things. One of the really powerful things it does, and it fuels our 50% plus win ratio on new business, is we actually will connect it to a brand's first-party data, and it will go score every customer acquisition and retention channel. And it will show the good, the bad, the ugly. So if you're asking me who's the perfect profile, yeah, they're doing 250 million plus. But it's one where when we run that, we're like, oh my gosh, there is gold. It forecasts the lift based on addressing and taking advantage of these things. And we'll have forecasts that it produces where you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to change this business. And then there's others where we're running, we're like, you guys are nailing it. And like, you could always find flaws. You can analyze anything. And if you're smart, you're going to find some flaws. But sometimes we'll be like, look, like here's the lift, but like keep doing what you're doing, or maybe layer this on. So it's the ones when we run them through Nova where it's like, there's gold. You have all these advantages and you're not either strategically taking advantage of them, or you don't have the right talent, or you're not executing properly, or you're not connecting the customer journey, where our eyes light up and we're like, we're going to get you crazy results.
How are you thinking about AI and how it fits into Nova?
Yeah, so we're actually working with Snowflake currently in data.world on building our own AI application that enables brands to basically query their first-party data and get any answer in real time. And we just did a hackathon at the office with Snowflake and data.world on that. We're really excited about that. But that's the one example where we're building something. Overall, we're trying to leverage the best third-party AI and technology. So we have a whole dedicated AI committee. We're measuring it. We're measuring the business impact. This last year, we reduced an outsource cost we have in one of our departments by $1.2 million by leveraging AI.
That's great.
So that allowed us to then have the team lean harder into that account, do more strategic work, have more time to work on it because of that. But I think for brands in general, I think I would encourage them to think less about trying to build AI applications, unless that's who you are, because some of the smartest people in those areas are doing that, versus how can I embrace them and use them to make my business more profitable and grow faster. And I think for talent, if I was a young person, I'm like coming out of college, I'm like, what skill set? I'll become a master AI operator. So a master at using those tools and really being able to do so. And I think that's where a lot of this disruption will occur, is stuff that is super tactical will start to get replaced by AI and technology. And so you need to be strategic, and you need to have a strategic element, or you need to be a master at utilizing these tools to where you can do 20 times the work or value as somebody else because you're a master operator of these AI platforms and tools.
I mean, that's great advice. And I think mine to young people, when they ask me what we should be doing, it's like AI is the next internet. You got to just that's where we're gonna make your fortune.
If I were to start a business today, easy win for somebody if they want an idea, create a service business where you go into companies, B2B companies, small businesses, and you know all the different AI platforms and you analyze their workflows and what they're doing and you help them implement it. And have a pricing model where it's based on savings. Zero risk to that business. I talked to somebody at one of the big 5 consulting firms that said if you built a 5 million EBITDA business that does just that, that they would buy that for $100 million.
Yeah.
No technology, pure services on AI. I think it's pretty easy to build that to 5 million EBITDA. And I think most early entrepreneurs would be pretty happy with the $100 million exit.
Yeah. The other one I tell people is build an AI SEM platform. So
yeah, that scares the shit out of me because, Google, I mean, I think search is really interesting. Paid search is getting to a point where we're not focused on that because it's going to be fully automated. It already is heavily automated.
Yeah.
So Google is obviously building that within their products. I don't know. MarTech scares me just because I think there's so much competition. It changes so quickly.
Exactly.
There's, platforms that you're connected to could change something to where your product doesn't work anymore. I think it's tough. And I wouldn't want to.
At least for the analysis side, like writing ad copy and keyword research, that stuff is, I think, easily done by AI more than people. Because back in the days where I built Incubator, we had to have teams of campaign managers writing all this content. And anyway, it's very labor intensive, and AI can now probably do it better.
Yeah,
faster.
100%. I think when you look at advertising, you look at creative, and you look at ad copy and data analysis. Those are three areas that it's getting heavily disrupted. And I think the technical audience creation and media buying is becoming less and less relevant because the platforms are doing that now on their own. So if you're a media buyer and you're trying to create these cute audiences versus using features within the platform that are using AI to do so, even if you beat it, it doesn't move the needle as opposed to having breakthrough creative and those types of things.
Also, that's a whole discussion. I'd love to get into another episode. But for this one, I want to move on briefly onto Twitter. Last month, Elon went on the New York Times summit, and there was a whole bunch of expletives that was used because Bob Iger threatened to pull advertising, or did pull advertising from Twitter, and that's Disney and a lot of other advertisers as well, Paramount, I think, a few others. But Elon was on stage with Andrew Ross Sorkin, and he was really, really visceral about it. What are your thoughts about where Twitter is going as an ad platform business? I mean, my experience as an advertiser and having used Twitter to advertise, they got the wrong model. They're running a CPM business where it should be cost per click and performance based. And and I've spoken to people there, but they want to sell brand impressions and engagements, and no one cares. People care about revenue and sales.
That's because it doesn't generate revenue and sales, and they can't show that. But before we go there,
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it's not. It's not.
The ROI is not.
It's
where
not
it's
equitable.
Needed,
Exactly. So the problem is. So here's the thing. If you said to me, Vinny, you can have clicks on Twitter for 0.001 cent, I'll buy as much as I can get because I can convert that. So the real question is, what's the market clearing price of a click from Twitter to a website? If I'm advertising to someone who's on desktop, I should be able to price it differently than someone's on mobile. Whether if I'm buying a mobile ad, maybe I'm trying to drive downloads for games. I don't want to pay on impression. I want to pay on a per click basis. But what's your thoughts on Twitter, and how much do you guys work with Twitter?
Yeah. So first of all, can you imagine? Cheers to Elon Musk, in that I couldn't imagine being the CEO of 3 massive public companies, let alone.
Well, technically, he's not the CEO anymore.
Yeah.
So
whatever he is,
Linda's the CEO.
I don't know how he does it.
I don't know how he does it either.
But
and like 12 kids and whatever.
Yeah,
else,
exactly. But we've never been a big player on Twitter. Like last year, we were the largest independent media buyer on Meta.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that our clients, we have a large we have about 400 and something clients, and probably 85% of them are consumer brands, not like just e-commerce, like omni-channel retail. And I think that Twitter, where the audience is, and typically where there's probably more effective strategies, is typically more for B2B. Whereas for us in the consumer sphere, it's more connected TV, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, search, these types of areas. So we've dabbled in Twitter and other stuff like Reddit and these types of things. And we're very performance oriented. We've never been able to see lift because of Twitter. Now, the one thing I'll say is attribution is a huge problem in general right now. And so what everybody has been trained for a long time because of Google and Google Analytics is to use last click attribution.
Yeah.
And Google wanted to train us that because search works
click.
very good
Exactly.
for last click attribution.
Yeah.
Well, now with what's happening, that's not as viable, and it's also proven to be inaccurate. And so we're more focused on overall business lift at this time. Mm-hmm. And so I think actually the way that Twitter is, or X, is hedging themselves is probably good with that trend. But the key will be the examples where they can show where brands are buying millions of dollars of media, and it's bringing a return that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so we just have not seen that. often across our clients. And so way before this transaction, but I mean, he's a smart guy. I'm sure he's going to figure it out. And I'm sure he's trying to figure out other ways to monetize it, because these social platforms, the entire monetization engine has always been advertising.
Yeah. He has legacy to deal with in a big way. Like the infrastructure they've got at Twitter is old legacy infrastructure for advertising. The one problem I think he's really got is the advertisers that are threatening or are pulling the advertising, they're not seeing ROI. So as much as they're saying we're not going to advertise this,
and they can get a gold star for righteousness.
Exactly. So they go, we're pulling the advertising. If it is making them money, they wouldn't pull it.
Agreed.
Their shareholders would crush them. Yeah. But they're not making money on it. And I think there's an infrastructural issue there at Twitter.
But I think you'd be surprised even. I mean, one of the biggest things that we do is we have to really educate brands on how they look at attribution, and really looking more at contribution than attribution.
Sure.
And some of the biggest brands in the world are still stuck on
last click
attribution models.
But last click still should get, if you just do an attribution model, you still want to give 33 to 50% of the attribution to the last click. But there is obviously some upstream value attributable, but last click does matter. And I'll tell you why. Like, what I saw in my experiences with running companies and on the agency side is often to get a customer to convert, they go and get a coupon somewhere. And that last click coupon is what actually put them over the edge. Yep. And so they go to Retail Me Not and all those sites, and they get this coupon. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why didn't that person convert for 3 months or 6 months, or how many times I heard them ads? But the moment they got this 20% discount on Retail Me Not, they converted as a customer. Now we have them for life or whatever it is. Yep. I think last click, 100% agree with you, is not correct to be 100%. But it's probably weighted the most out of the others in the funnel.
Yeah, agreed.
In my experience, anyway. Okay, selling your company. Let's give some advice to people out there. I mean, we've both sold companies before, and you more recently now. What advice do you have for someone who's looking to sell their company, shopping it around? Did you shop it around? Did someone come to you? What happens when you have one bidder versus 2 versus 3? Maybe to spend a few minutes on that. Yeah,
so I've learned a lot over the last 4 years on this subject, and it's been a blast. And as a guy that loves to do deals and has always had that sales mentality, I think it also ruined me to where other sales aren't as fun.
Yeah.
So we've done, I think now, 8 transactions in the last 4 years, 2 of our own and then as a buyer. And I actually think going on the buy side is where things clicked, and I also started to see mistakes I made in my first process. But things I've learned, I mean, the first is, people are like, I want to build this company to sell. I'm not a huge believer in that. You build a great, profitable business that is scalable and doesn't have big risks like Pareto customers or a team member that if they were to leave, then you're going to get the best offer. What happens a lot of times with entrepreneurs is they start getting these inbound interest. And most of that stuff is just bullshit. It's outbound email. We do it. You're straight building a list. But I would take some of those calls. I did, and I would recommend that to entrepreneurs, and just learn. Just listen to them, learn, build your network. But ultimately, then as I was getting ready, even if I had somebody that made me an offer, I would go interview investment bankers, and I would hire a banker.
Yeah, I used the banker my last time, and I can tell you now, without him, we would have made less money for sure. And even though we had 2 buyers at the table, and the one was like, we're capped, we're not paying a cent more, we got an increase on that. So it was. I'm a huge fan of bankers.
And for me, the value of the banker is a couple things. One is there's so much work, and it's a massive distraction, and it's helpful.
And it can ruin the relationship as well between you and the buyer.
And that's the second. 2 is that they're great prospectors.
Yeah.
And it depends. Like the banker we used on our last transaction, which was a big one, super. I mean, he's the best.
Yeah.
Sanjay Chadha at Canaccord Genuity. He was super strategic. In my first process, he was fantastic. But really, he was lining up meetings for me to knock down. And I think I took 80 meetings in that process.
Wow.
And we had, I think, 10 bidders in that. In the last process, we had 30 bidders.
Wow.
And the value of that is the market will dictate the value. It's not just your enterprise value. It's how much cash are you getting versus roll. Is there an earnout or not? What's the terms of these things? What's your non-compete? What's, all these different aspects that go into it. So they'll create that market for you. But then also, as you start going through rounds of bids, which they'll manage, you said it exactly right, which is, buyers want to be the favorite. And for me, I sold to 2 private equity firms. And in our last process, we had about half strategics and half private equity. If you start negotiating and pushing them really hard, people will take it personally and get offended. And so the buyer is nice because they sit in the middle where they can say, hey, the team loves you guys. You guys are the best, but you're not competitive in these areas. And they can help guide them and increase value as well as other things that are important to you.
Yeah.
So for me now as a buyer, it's really interesting because what we want to find is off-market deals that don't have a banker. And why is that? Because we're going to get a better deal. At the same time, sometimes I actually prefer the banker because those off-market deals are a cluster to get done. The QOV takes forever. The legal diligence is a mess. Once you sign an LOI, it might take, 4 months to close or 5 months.
6 months to close. Yeah.
And so the banker helps in those areas. And the last thing I'll say for you, if you're a seller, the other reason why you want multiple bidders is like the way this whole process works is as the seller, you have all the leverage up until you sign an LOI. And that LOI means jack shit. It's worth as much as the paper's printed on. As soon as that LOI is signed, all the leverage goes to the buyer. And if you have one buyer, what happens a lot, and this is not something that we do, is they'll get you very pregnant with the deal. You'll be exhausted. It will be this huge distraction. You're already like thinking about the future. And then they'll have flaws. And they'll start saying, well, because of this flaw.
Dropping the price by this much.
And if you have one, you either are going to have to bail. And the last thing you want is to run a process and have it blow up on you.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not, people are like, what's wrong with this company?
Doesn't look good.
So
well, I'm hoping we can get on screen a tweet that I published, but we'll link in the show notes otherwise. But the tweet went something along these lines. If you have one bidder for your company, you'll get a discount to fair market value. If you have 2 bidders, you'll get fair market value. And if you have 3 or more, you'll get a premium.
I think that's fair.
And so when people are buying companies or selling companies rather, you should always try and get that second buyer at the table so that you at least get fair market value. And if you're lucky enough to get a 3rd or 4th or 5th buyer, the price just goes up. And that's very, very, it's a very important tactic when selling because if there's only one buyer, he sets the price.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. And also just knowing the buyer and are they a discount buyer or not? Like Power Digital, us as a buyer, we're actually closing a transaction tomorrow that I'm thrilled and we're probably paying a premium. But like, we couldn't be more excited about it. The revenue synergies, the cost synergies, strategically what it does. Yeah. We're not trying to get the best deal. We're trying to find the best fit that's going to make us the best combined. And so there's buyers that want, there's other buyers that their whole play is they're really just buying revenue and clients. Like we're not buying revenue and clients. If they're buying revenue and clients, they've got to try to get the best deal possible.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that and trying to, I like running a wider process. It's fun and talking to as many people as you can. You make a great network that way. Yeah. And then narrowing it down as opposed to some people that they don't want to do that for some reason, right?
Yeah, then that's just not their thing. Then. Yeah, they should do something else.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the rapid fire questions part of the show. What's your favorite book?
Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
Okay, great. What's your go-to habit you think everyone should implement in their daily routine?
Go-to habit in the daily routine. I listen to podcasts in the shower. I don't know how people don't shower in the morning. I couldn't do it. I have to shower every morning. I'm a little OCD, but I have to shower every morning right when I get up and before I go to sleep. Yep. And
I'm the same. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So it's not a
Well, I go to gym first. I wake up, I go to gym, then I shower.
Yeah, I should do that, but I don't. But
then you shower 3 times a day?
And then I drink my athletic greens and my protein and, cranking.
Okay. What's the best bit of financial advice you've ever received?
That entrepreneurs make, you said it earlier, entrepreneurs make bad investors because we're so optimistic. And so, having people, as you're investing your own money, having people that are pros around you and building a great team.
It's probably one of the reasons why I'm a seed investor more than I am late stage because, you write the small checks and eventually something hits and you make it because like the bigger checks require so much more cynicism that you have to, so that's why I back.
I don't look at the risks. I'm looking at all the things. We can do this. This will be great. Where somebody that's looking at your downside risks is a good person to have.
What's a common misconception about business or life that you'd like to set the record straight on?
About business or life?
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of pressure on CEOs now to be responsible for the team's mental health and work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And I think for any young person or myself included, if you're banking on somebody else to be responsible for your mental health, you're screwed.
You're in trouble. Yeah, I agree.
So you got to own it yourself. And like what recharges me is very different probably than you.
Yeah. And you got to
and
find
what
the
recharges
culture.
you is very different. And so like, how could a CEO or your manager or even a mentor advise you? Like you need to figure that out and do the self-discovery.
You got to find the cultures you fit into. And yeah, it often means bouncing around a bit. Last question. If you could go back in time and meet one person in history, who would it be?
I don't know if man, that's a good question. I'm not going to give a very deep answer. I think I would just go back right now and play a round of golf with Tiger Woods in his prime.
Really? Yeah. That guy was.
It would just be fun to see.
I don't
him.
think we'll ever get another Tiger Woods.
I don't think so either.
So I think he's
he's still
the GOAT.
trying. He's still
but
said he's going to play a tournament a month, so we'll see.
See how
He's
he
a
goes.
competitor.
He's a Tiger.
Yeah.
Well, Grayson, great having you in the studio. Thanks so much for joining me, and it was a fantastic episode. We covered a lot. I think people have to play this one back at 0.75 to really
Yeah.
absorb everything.
I bet. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a great
Pleasure.
time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Cheers.